Welcome to the Feisworld podcast, engaging conversations that cross the boundaries between business, art, and the digital world.
I always wanted to create something edgy and fashionable yet wearable in the martial arts world, because growing up, I noticed people don't really associate martial artists as fashionable. And I think martial arts, like dancers, they express bodily movements that's just very beautiful and very graceful. And it only makes sense that what they wear when performing and even training is really an extension of that movement. Typical Wushu attire is very colorful. There's a lot of silks and satins and embroideries and sashes and very flowy kind of comfortable material. And it drapes very well. So Wushu practitioners are very electrifying to watch. As a creator, you cannot just be involved only in design, but you have to learn the making of, you have to learn there's the manufacturing side, production, sourcing. You have to learn also how to build relationships with different people on different levels. We should always stay fluid and let our minds, be reshaped. I think strength, confidence, and wisdom, it comes from experience. And that can happen at any age. And the more you just keep doing and learning, the more knowledge you gain. And you can equip and empower yourself with that knowledge, which are really the things that nobody can take away from you.
You're listening to episode number 42 of the Feisworld podcast. And this is your host, Fei Wu. As you can imagine, it's been a pretty long journey, and I'm still having a lot of fun. Today, I am introducing my new friend, Chris Yen, who is an actress and entrepreneur from a proud lineage of Wushu and Tai Chi masters. Her mom, Bo Sim-mark, is one of the premier Chinese martial arts practitioners, and her brother, Donnie Yen, is currently the #1 kung fu action star in Hong Kong, whose latest film, Ip Man 3, will be released in 2016. I decided to interview Chris, who recently launched a fashion line in June 2015 called ChrisYenFusion, featuring athletic-inspired casual wear. But what intrigued me the most is that Chris had never worked as a fashion designer, yet she was very determined to be an entrepreneur with the support of her family and friends. She recalls the experience as a 8-month boot camp, and you can check out her progress and the making of images and videos right off her Facebook. If you have been listening to Feisworld podcast for a little while, you probably know that one of my biggest initiatives these days is to interview women who inspire. Particularly, I've been always fascinated by women who are unmistakably curious and resilient, and Chris certainly is one of them. We explore Chris's origin stories that made us time travel back to when she was growing up in Boston as a little girl. She trained with her mom, Bo Sim-mark, at her Wushu classes every single day. We talked about why she made the decision to create a fashion line in an industry that has always been crowded and competitive. In addition to having two very fashion-forward members of the family, her mom and brother, Chris added, the film and fashion world both have such huge impact on people's views, sometimes distorted, sometimes very positive and profound. She feels so fortunate to have access through both mediums, which can set strong and encouraging statements and actions. She feels a responsibility with these powerful tools to also influence other young minds, especially young women out there. I really hope you enjoy this episode, and if you do, please share with your family and friends. And the best gift you could ever give me is a review on iTunes. I hope you share full transparent feedback, exactly how you feel about my podcast and who else you would like to hear next. This episode is brought to you by the O'Malley Taekwondo Center in Peabody, Massachusetts. O'Malley Taekwondo is a traditional martial arts school that welcomes men, women, and children. The school also integrates self-defense training to help members at any age to be more alert and prepared. As a student of Mr. O'Malley's and a practitioner of Taekwondo for over 15 years, I am proud to be part of this movement, teaching others useful and practical skills. The school has a wonderful community of friendly kids and adults who come together to practice and stay in shape. As a Feisworld podcast listener, you are entitled to a special offer from O'Malley Taekwondo, the 30-day trial for only $95 that includes a free uniform, 3 private lessons, and unlimited class time. By the way, there are over 35 classes available each week. To claim this offer, simply go to feisworld.com/promo. That is again, feisworld.com/promo.
I'm so excited to finally chat with you.
Me too. I've been looking forward to this, and I want to learn more about you too. It seems we are, like you said, 2-3 degrees of separation here. So we have some common friends, I guess.
Yeah, many common friends, and I met some of your family members as well. And, to kind of kick it off, one of the reasons why, there are so many reasons that I'm excited to be chatting with you, but one of which is, as you know, I run Feisworld podcast, and so far I've released 39 episodes. And since the very beginning, I'm still super eager to chat with female entrepreneurs and strong women, spiritual, strong, empowered women who can then who have transformed their own lives and have all these wisdoms that they could share with, women my age, younger women. And in this case, in your case, that I'm super excited that you are, in fact, a super strong woman, and I know that you can easily beat up any guy, 200 pounds, 6'2". Oh. I have proof.
I don't know about that.
They admitted that and said you're incredibly physically strong.
That is, who said that?
Multiple sources. And as you know, you are a very talented martial artist because you come from, you work out very hard. I definitely believe that, but it's certainly in the genes as well, because you come from in my opinion, the most prestigious sort of martial art family here in New England. And it's incredible. I've read so much about your mom, and I watch all your brother's movies.
Oh, wow. Wow. Thank you so much. I'm really, really flattered, but I definitely am not the strongest woman in the world. I really don't think I can barely lift up my 75-pound dog, let alone try to beat up a 200-pound man. And I'm a petite woman, and so most people are kind of twice my size. And I've kind of gotten used to seeing the world that way.
Yeah, let's get right into it. You have a new fashion line, which I feel like I'm monitoring the growth of it, and it finally launched on June 1st. It's called the ChrisYenFusion collection.
Yes.
So tell my audience about it. Tell us all about it.
Well, ChrisYenFusion is a street fitness fashion line, and it's really inspired by my martial arts roots. And it's because, I always wanted to create something edgy and fashionable yet wearable in the martial arts world, because growing up, I noticed people don't really associate martial artists as fashionable people.
So true.
I think, martial artists have their own fashion sense, and a lot of it really stems from within. I think it has a lot to do with, the disciplinary training, very high level physical training, and that mental awareness that comes along with it. And that sort of combination cultivates a certain level of expression. And I think martial arts, like dancers, they express bodily movements that's just very beautiful and very graceful. And it only makes sense that what they wear when performing and even training is really an extension of that movement. That's sort of how I see it. And, with clothes and fabrics and materials, it can be very beautiful. And especially when it's worn the right way and really enhances one's features. So in movement, it can be physically very stunning. So I'm a very visual person, very imaginative, and that's really what I tapped into. This was all stemmed from my traditional Wushu roots, because in Wushu, I'm sure as you're very familiar, it's an exhibitional type of martial arts sport, and quite fancy. This is very broad too. We work with a lot of different weapons, and the typical Wushu attire is very colorful. There's a lot of silks and satins and embroideries and sashes, and very flowy kind of comfortable material. And it drapes very well. So Wushu practitioners are very electrifying to watch. And especially when they're at a very high skill. They're very powerful. The movements are very graceful. But it just sort of makes sense. You combine that fashion sense with certain material types with that type of bodily expression. So it felt very natural for me to tap into that. And that's really what I know. And it comes from my roots. I try to, anything that I really embark on, I really try to tap into my background and just what I know best, because I feel that's the best way to approach something. It's organic. And, you may find that there's still a lot of areas to keep exploring further with it.
I learned about your family even before I came to the United States, and we're talking about 15 years ago. And I knew about your mom and your brother because he's in the film industry, but your mom, my Mandarin, by the way, please excuse my accent, Cantonese accent.
Yes.
So Bosun Mark, is that how you say your mom's name?
Yes, Bosun Mark.
Bosun Mark. She's legendary, and I learned about her when I was probably only a teenager at the time, and I was wondering, if you could speak to your upbringing a little bit, because you started Wushu when you were 4 years old, and you competed in the first, I believe, Wushu International Tournament, and you placed at the very top 3. And you've been training ever since. What was it like? By the way, for my audience, not only this didn't happen in China, in Guangzhou, or, somewhere, but it happened right here in Boston, in New England. Tell us about your upbringing.
Well, it was quite colorful. It was very colorful. And, at the time, being so young, that was my world. It was whatever I was doing and whatever I was surrounded by was very normal for me. But, later on growing up, I look back and I realized, wow, I did come from a very unique upbringing, and I have 2 very unique parents. Definitely not your typical sort of, traditional Chinese family. And I feel very blessed. I feel like the universe has blessed me with a really cool family, and it's just such a strong foundation. And, I hope to, not let my parents down. I don't want to let my family down. So, I'm striving to always, do better, whatever I embark on. I want to throw in 100% passion and effort and purity. So, growing up, it was quite chaotic, also, and I'd say probably confusing at times, because I was really the only young female kid around who was doing what I was doing. No one had heard of Wushu at the time.
Wow.
Yeah, and when people think of Chinese Kung Fu, of course, they immediately go to the typical kind of slapstick Kung Fu movies and Bruce Lee, and, no one knew what Wushu was. But Boston, Chinatown, is a very small community, and, the word definitely traveled very fast, and we were performing a lot in local events, and my mom's school is becoming more and more well-known. Students came from all walks of life. They would fly over to learn from her from many parts of the world. So it was a very adult-oriented environment, and everyone was very colorful. It was just it's all sorts of personalities, you name it, and it was really interesting, But then at the same time, my mom's school was situated in the outskirts of Chinatown. But at the same time, I also grew up in a Jewish community in Newton, and I was like the only Chinese girl in my class.
Wow.
Yeah, so there's, sort of that Newton community environment. And then right after school, I would have to go to Chinatown to my mom's studio and start training. And I would train. She would put me in almost every one of her classes. And, she was so passionate about her teachings. She would teach back to back all day long,
Wow.
7 days a week, especially when the school was starting to pick up and, she was kind of in high demand. So I would attend all the classes, at a very young age, and just not knowing that I was really absorbing, all of this energy. I was absorbing her movements and her skills and the way she would communicate and teach her students, which was most of the time nonverbal. Her English was very limited. She also is not a woman who speaks a lot. She expresses through her internal energy. That really is the best way to describe it. And it was kind of like a big playground for me. I think I had a lot of fun just hanging out with the students, and I would also sort of pretend to take on that teacher's role. And I remember usually before classes, we have an area that's closed off where the students can warm up and practice. And I used to go around and sort of poke fun at the students, like, oh, you're like 12 inches away from the split, and I was a bit of a ball buster and kind of, because I knew that, I was a little bit cocky for my age too, because I think a lot of these things, since my mom had really pushed me at a young age, things came a little bit more naturally for me. So to me, I thought, oh, well, if I can do it, you should be able to do it,
Probably not.
Yeah, what did I know? But so I remember there was a lot of fun times. It was definitely a lot of hardcore training, because my life basically consisted of training and wushu, and then in music. My father's a musician.
Oh, I didn't know that.
He played the erhu, the Chinese erhu. He was actually one of the first people in Boston who brought the erhu instrument and started performing with that. And he was also the first musician to play erhu with the Boston Civic Symphony. So, and he also plays the violin. So music was definitely a big influence in our family. Plus, my mom used to be first soprano.
Wow.
Yeah, this is way before Donnie and I were born. So she was singing a lot too. She was really into musical stage performance, and singing was part of her thing, accompanied by her martial arts performance.
Wow.
So she was really ahead of that early on, which is why later on she went on to develop Wushu theater. And she was choreographing and directing stage theater in like programs in Harvard and at Boston University. So different university levels she was invited by them to teach and to perform as well.
Wow. It's so funny. In 15 minutes, somehow, I learned so much about you and your family. I had zero idea that both of your parents are musicians. And I just have to say that it's so funny. I realize I've been doing martial art, in particular Taekwondo, for, say, 14 years now, roughly. I've been bragging sometime like 14 years, and when I was a kid, I did Kung Fu, but really I want my audience to understand that the level of training, the intensity, and sort of the influence that I had is really nothing compared to your experience. The differentiation is definitely worth mentioning.
Well, it was different. It was definitely different. But I think, with any form of martial arts, the core principles are still there. You learn at a very disciplinary level. You learn at a very high mental level, because, also you're training your mind. You're training your mental awareness and alertness. You're sharpening your mind as well. And your coordination, and not whole physical bodily movement, just kind of naturally stems from that. So I believe it really starts in the mind first. And I think all level of martial arts training really, hones that.
Mm-hmm. It's I wrote a note on my book here and says, the moment I start talking about martial art with you, I think we could have like a 10 episode series. I really,
Yes.
maybe because I didn't come from a martial art family. For some reason, this is like one of the most proud aspect of who I am, and it is still, to be honest, like a very important element of my day to day. And I feel like I want to think. I think and I walk like a martial artist, and it's so integrated as part of my life.
But definitely a martial artist, Faye. I mean, 14 years is a very long time, and that shows your dedication. I'm sure how you've evolved. Getting a black belt is not easy, and especially as a woman. And I've read about your background on your website, and you're very diverse in your skills and knowledge. So definitely something to always be proud of and brag about.
Oh, thank you. And I think what really intrigued me about your fashion line and martial art, even though, yes, there's the basic line, there's the Wushu line, and there's definitely a very obvious interplay. But naming aside, what I also begin to read about your line is that you're not just a woman who like the rest of us like fashion, want to be a fashion designer, but I think you have a very unique and very crystal clear message that you're delivering here with the posts that you've shared on Facebook, for instance, and I keep reading them and I find very inspiring, one of which is called it's called The Business of Fashion. It's called Op-Ed, I believe. It's Weaving Better Narratives About Women. And in particular, the theme about the fashion industry must do more to create more compelling, nuanced narratives about women and girls. And I'd love to have you speak to that. It's very special.
Well, I want to say, first of all, I do not consider myself as a fashion designer, really. I love the creative process and energy in anything that is, just involves in creation. And it just so happened, like, I got inspired to jump into this without having any background and seriously not realizing what I'm getting myself into. And it's a really crazy industry. I never thought of myself as a fashion-oriented person, to be truthful to that. In fact, I used to look up to my brother as the fashion icon. Yeah, because we're so many years apart, and we didn't grow up together. So essentially, I grew up as an only child, but he was already out making movies in Hong Kong. But he would come home and visit, and every time he'd show up, he'd be sporting like this new cool black hoodie or some new kind of sweatpant or t-shirt. I'm like, what is that? It's really eye-popping, and especially being from Boston is Boston is considered more of a conservative town.
I totally agree.
We didn't have exposure to that. There was no access to that. So I just started seeing him like, wow, that's cool. And I've always been a tomboy. And for some reason, I was always drawn more to men's fashion, just the way it sort of cuts and it's tailored. And there's just something very strong about that. So that was really my first exposure. I never grew up wanting to get into this industry. I guess I don't really look at fashion in the sense of like most fashion people who develop themselves as fashion designers. For me, it's about inspiration. It's about art. But out of that, everything I also try to do from here on, there needs to be a purpose. There needs to be a good intent. I just feel as long as I'm true to what I believe in, and I choose the right path in whatever I do, whether it's through my fashion clothing line or even through films or even through writing. I want to hone in on this message, and it's empowering. It's an empowerment message, not just necessarily for women, but the younger generation, the next generation. I think we need more education and to sort of shift our mindsets a bit. Send out all the positive vibes as much as possible. And hopefully, I can be a good influence on somebody.
Yeah, you have been. I think your brand has a very clear message, and I think, one of the questions I had earlier on, I think you're almost on the path of addressing that as well, is I would like to kind of dive into some of the challenges that you've possibly faced in the past, that, 2, 4, 6 months. And I'm interested in learning about what is the size of your operation, sort of what is the core team, the maker team that you're managing on a regular basis.
Oh, man. Okay. So before I start that one, I just want to go back for a second there.
Sure.
When asking me about, what other sort of career paths I've taken. And I'm still on that. It's just that's not my primary focus right now. But definitely the martial arts Wushu element has played a big role in this new venture. But also having the film experience, being an on-camera artist, being an actress, having that level of expression. I was trained in acting both in front of the camera and theater. Being exposed to production on set, doing action choreography, beating people up on set, so all of that is still a big part of it. Like I said, I just take everything from all my experiences and I just throw it into this. And that's essentially where it came from because, being in the film industry also, I was exposed to, especially in LA, a lot of, fashionistas and styling and photo shoots and all that. So it all just sort of came together. So I just sort of picked up a little bit of everything along the way. The film experiences really exposed me to a lot. I actually started out working for Donnie in film production, so I would get to travel a lot and watch inner workings of choreography and how to make films and on, various different levels. So it was very educational. And then coming to LA to try to carve my own path, just my own little path here, definitely was very, very challenging. I'm sure, as you're aware, being Asian American in the Hollywood industry, it has its own setbacks. And I think I quickly realized, I had to make sort of a decision. Do I want to sort of follow the herd? Do I want to continue on this path? I feel like getting in front of casting directors and trying to audition, for something that I may not necessarily be in love with. I wasn't sure if that was really truly me. So when I started to realize that, I became more picky about the projects that I wanted to get involved in and picky about, the kind of roles that I wanted to express myself in. And then that's when I started to actually develop my own projects. I developed several scripts over the years, and I actually tried to shop them around and taken on a producer role, both here and in China.
Wow.
So,
I'm so glad that you opened this up, by the way. I'm so glad we didn't jump right into sort of the next steps, but I have your IMDb open right now. I would love to have you speak to some of the learnings, as you have mentioned, but some of the setbacks as well, because I interviewed John Haggerty. He's a Broadway actor who's based in New York City and who shared also his very authentic origin stories with me as well. He's half Korean. So tell me about, maybe kind of educate us, like open up this, Pandora box of people who've never been in the film, TV industry. What is it like? What is it like to be an Asian American working in LA as an actress?
I think, first of all, these days, we are definitely seeing a lot more diverse roles. We're seeing a lot more Asian Americans on TV, in films, and taking on bigger roles and in even main character roles, which is definitely really refreshing. And I'm so happy to see that. But I still feel like, there's some ways to go. That there's always room for more improvement. I'm not as active now in the auditioning space, as my primary focus is really launching this. But I still would love to continue on that dream. It's an unfulfilled mission for me right now, is to get my own film off the ground. So that's something I'm actually very, very passionate about. I actually love acting. But when I discovered that it could be another form of expression outside of martial arts, outside of the only thing that I really knew, it just opened up my world. It's like a part of my creative brain and muscle that was untapped. And when I finally discovered it, I was just so passionate. So I feel, because the industry itself is really difficult and really challenging, it's so competitive, that, I was never quite successful reaching my goal in that. So I haven't let go yet. If I could give advice to young aspiring actors, I would say, don't go for it. Don't get into the business unless you are really solid and grounded, and really got to have a very level-headed, head on your shoulders. And, that comes with a lot of things, of course, your upbringing, your family background, who you are, your experiences. And there's a lot of very young actors who are very, very mature, far more mature than their age, and a lot more mature than I was when I was their age. And because I certainly know that if I had tried to embark on this in my late teens or early 20s, I would have easily been too caught up and have gotten really lost. And, I did enter this later in life, and I used to feel like, I started too late, I don't think it's going to happen. But, now when I sort of look back, I'm actually fortunate, because I would have probably easily gotten caught up. It's hard to find mentors out here when you're essentially kind of alone. And I came out here pretty much on my own. I don't have any family in LA, and Donnie, was always stayed in Asia. We've just got very different lives, and so I never really had a mentor in this space. But I just kept seeking. I kept seeking different instructors and acting coaches who weren't just skillful at teaching. Acting is really not acting, but who also, have a lot of life experience to share. And that was really important to me, because it's such an intimate process, and it's a skill that you really have to develop, in a confidence to learn to shed away all your inhibitions and to shed away all that, self-consciousness, in order to achieve a certain level where you can just be in the moment, be truthful, be very sincere, and be very real. And I think some of the best acting really comes through characters and actors when they have reached that certain mental state, as well as it comes through in their physical performance, because the camera captures everything. It captures your thought process. You don't even have to have dialogue. So it's a really intimate setting, and it's much easier when we as audience watch a performance, to judge and to criticize, and it's much easier said than done. And that's why it takes years and years and years of training to hone that skill.
Yeah. Especially as a woman, I think with this training, I think you had mentioned, it's so interesting to me when you said, go to auditions, which, by the way, I've done a couple of them for commercials, completely out of the blue, random, and right. And I've never experienced that until actually just a few months ago. It was 6 months ago, for a Christmas commercial. They're looking for a martial art instructor. I'll never forget the experience. It was not chosen, but I was just thinking, it's really, and I had a full-time job, I still do, so it wasn't my primary focus. It was really for my own thrill. But to be able to handle rejections and still be so grounded and really believe in yourself and continue with that momentum, be tenacious. I feel like that's the energy you're portraying here. And I think women will really resonate with that voice, because women are really throwing themselves out there, so out there these days, but doesn't mean that they're always balanced and we have moments that we doubt ourselves all the time. But I think, not having to line up all the stars, not needing all the answers. In this case, you start your own fashion line, the production, all these, so many different levels of expertise and the dots that you have to connect to do what you do. So I think maybe that could be a segue to start telling us about some of the particular challenges and thrill and excitement.
Yeah, no, certainly. Just to wrap up on the last note, when you hit that key word is tenacity. And I believe, everything happens for a reason. I do believe that. I feel that where I'm at now is a big part of my journey in the past. Without having that experience of rejection over and over and over again, without having gone through that, there's no way possible I could be doing, still trying to do what I'm doing now. So, leading into this, it definitely still has its own set of challenges in the fashion industry that I'm still learning about. I really had no idea how overwhelming, how many moving parts and how diverse and just how many sub-industries within this big fashion conglomerate there is. You cannot, as a creator, you cannot just be involved only in design, but you have to learn the making of, you have to learn there's the manufacturing side, production, sourcing. You have to learn also how to build relationships with different people on different levels. The manufacturing end is also, I'm still learning about that. That's not my primary focus, but I have to do it. I have to learn it. And it's really complex. But, I try to find factories who have kind of a open mind and open door, open communication policy. So that way we will develop a relationship, because essentially it's like a marriage. When you find your factory, that is so important. Like, you need to always have those communication channels open, and you have to develop trust with each other. They have to learn how you work, understand your product and your brand and your vision, and I have to understand, how they work, so that, I want them to be the most efficient they can be and do the best making my products. But not all factories work on that level. The challenge is there's definitely plenty. This is an industry you need to have a very, now I'm not saying that I did when I jumped into this, but I quickly had to find and figure it out. You need to have a very clear plan moving forward. What it is that you're trying to do, what's the purpose, and a business plan as well. You can't just be focused on the creativity, but you've got to learn how to balance the business end of it, especially being a new designer entrepreneur.
What are some of the lessons learned, I guess, in that sense?
Well, because this is an industry that could quickly eat up funding without you even realizing it, because everything is kind of like a domino effect. We cannot have one thing without the other, and so on and so forth. And going back to having a really clear plan is having a clear budget involved too. And I think starting out, the first 2 to 3 months was actually quite shaky for me. And that's the sort of biggest lesson, is that I went in head over heels because I was driven by inspiration and passion. It's great to have all of that, but I don't think it was wisely balanced, because I didn't exactly have a clear budget or a clear business plan in mind. And I was just trying to, pick up knowledge wherever I could, and I was a little bit all over the place. This is a industry where you have to be extremely organized and efficient. Like I said, or else it's going to burn away your time, your funding, and your energy very quickly. And so I very quickly did get overwhelmed. My plate was, I was stretched too thin. My plate was really full. So in the beginning, I tried to, work with some interns from FITM, and I tried to, meet all kinds of people. just like in any industry, like the film industry, not everyone you meet is always going to carry the same torch, or their heart is going to be in the same place as yours. Mm-hmm. So it's also an industry where I think, people who are veterans in it, they can easily smell new blood. And I think being, sort of a petite Asian woman, there is sort of that, people are judgmental. So I think that kind of came with it a little bit. Like, they can tell, all right, you're a newcomer, you're on your own, you kind of don't really know what you're doing. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of people out there that will try to take advantage. And that is, unfortunately, that's just all over the place. So I think that's one thing that, looking back, if I had to do it differently, mm-hmm. I think I would have held back a little bit on my excitement.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe read a little bit more and talk to a little bit more people and reach out rather than just diving into it. I always feel like, there's not enough time, time's going to go by really fast and I don't want to wait anymore. Mm-hmm. It's just, now is the time. And also because I see, my family's getting older. It's hard to see your parents get older. So mm-hmm. I really just, I don't want to waste any more time before it's too late.
Got that. Wow.
I'm kind of driven by a lot of things.
It's an incredible journey. And I think it does, having a fashion line encapsulate and the sort of your background when you said dance and martial art. I see all those elements, like it's part of a kaleidoscope that kind of concludes what you've ever learned in life as part of your fashion line. And I rarely say this, and I know if you go to Parson today, I'm sure that's kind of they would tell you a similar story where, younger designers, more experienced designers, their collections are a reflection of their souls, which is what I see in CY, and I think that's what's really unique about it. So really, good luck to your endeavors, and I'm going to stay very close to your Facebook page and all of that.
Thank you.
I'm also interested in learning about what you think as a brand. Maybe perhaps this is part of who you are for yourself, or as part of the ChrisYenFusion fashion line. What are maybe the upcoming short-term next steps or things you want to explore, things you're interested in doing next for your fashion line? Or is it too early to say right now?
Well, no, because this is definitely a very fast-paced industry, and it works seasonally. So you always have to think a few seasons ahead. However, I don't think that I'm that kind of a brand or that kind of a designer, whereas I'm not really trying to follow the trends here, to be honest. My trend is kind of coming from, my background. So I feel, I want to create pieces that are functional and can be timeless. So hopefully, that will carry through to many, many, many seasons and never really go out of date. I think moving forward, I would like to expand more into men's line, because now, it's predominantly female empowered, which is, the root and foundation of this. Mm-hmm. However, there are also unisex options because, in the martial arts space, of course, you cannot just have women's wear. Mm-hmm. So I do want to expand into a larger men's products. I have unisex right now, but I'm still working to fine-tune what I have. I started out thinking that I was going to create a capsule collection of 10 pieces, but somehow that doubled into about 20-something. So I certainly don't have all my designs in production right now. That's not possible. It wouldn't be wise to do that. That's another advice I definitely give anyone who wants to start this is try to start small. There's really no hurry. No one is putting these deadlines on you. You're not starting out going with buyers and wholesalers and distributors. It's okay even to start with maybe 3 to 5 pieces in a set, and then sort of figure out, what are your staple pieces? What are your core pieces? And out of that, that core should really stem from your message. What is this about? and why. I always have to put the why there. I think everything should have an answer to that.
I love that process you just described, because what you're saying essentially is being nimble, and instead of thinking about 15, 20 signature pieces and how each one was going to sell and resonate with your audience, customers, but instead you're testing out the market a little bit and see what really works, instead of just sort of hiding behind the assembly line and just always trying to crank out more and new products. I really love that, because I think not only if they're future fashion designers who's listening to the podcast, but as a project manager, in particular, a digital producer, that's something I'm trying to hone on my own skills and trying to deliver to my clients as well, is not to write, for instance, like a 200-page business requirement document, but creating these nimble prototypes to really begin to test out your ideas and make adjustments, continue to learn and discover along the way. So I very much encourage that.
No, absolutely. Because, I'm still trying to figure out my stamp in all of this. What is that sort of one or two core elements that I can really hone in on and develop it further? Because I'm just getting my feet wet right now. And I've met a lot of veterans in this industry. I've been very honored to meet some really cool people who had a wealth of knowledge to share. And they've been in the business 30, 40 years, and they're still learning. It's just one of those industries. You never stop, especially, in a textile world. Nowadays, with so many technological advances, fabrics and materials are becoming very high tech, and they're being incorporated into fashion, as you can see in a lot of activewear. I'm not so much in that space yet. I'm not exactly, I'm not trying to compete with Nike or any of those activewear brands. I don't really think about it on that level. But I guess, life to me is sort of a big discovery and exploration. And I think anything that you sort of discover and you do and you hone in on out of that, is going to be organic. It's going to be very real, and something that, nobody can take those qualities away from you. And, abundance, there's just too much of that in the world right now. I'm really big on, I'm still learning, what recycling and sustainability, and that's also another important characteristic of my brand, is that I don't want to follow the fast fashion path. That's, if I could also be a contributor in some way. There's a lot of textile wastage in this industry, so much. It's almost heartbreaking, and all the materials that does not get used, it could turn into waste, which therefore it will end up in our landfills. And so that's a big, contributor to our environment. So I'm really keen on that. I'm trying to still figure out, how can I continue to sort of support that, because I believe in that. I don't like to waste things. I want to keep exploring textile recycling. Hopefully at some point, my company and my brand will get to that stage where I can align myself with these textile recycling plants or companies. So all the materials that I use, I can then recycle that and use it back and, make other things with it. I really believe that's kind of how the world should be.
As a, for you in your position, a powerful, physically, mentally, Asian American woman, I would like to close on the podcast and ask my last question, which is, what is the advice you would give to women at any age of your choice? What is your advice to them, given what you have learned till now and how the world has changed?
For me, that's actually a very deep question. It brings up a lot of things, but I would probably say, where I'm at right now, and I believe we're always evolving, and we should be. our minds are always, and we should always stay fluid and let our minds, be reshaped. I think strength, confidence, and wisdom, it comes from experience. And that can happen at any age. And the more you just keep doing and learning, the more knowledge you gain. And you can equip and empower yourself with that knowledge, which are really the things that nobody can take away from you. I know I mentioned this earlier because at the end of the day, that's your best asset. That's your best confidence. All of the external stuff, beauty and cosmetics and sex appeal, how we look at ourselves, how we think other people look at us, there's really no substance to that, unless you're truly passionate and engaged in what you love to do. And I think what stems out of that is just a certain organic beauty that just comes from within. As long as you stay real and you're passionate and you have a true purpose, you can attain anything. And I don't believe there's any age barrier to that at all. My mother was a true representation of that. Although I didn't have any mentors growing up, I definitely channel her and look at her path and who she is and how far she's come. And especially being the first Asian woman to set foot in North America, to do what she did without in any English language. This was a really incredible journey. So to me, that's my source of strength. And I believe every woman has that source of strength. You just have to look from within. Don't read these gossip magazines. Don't watch these, don't watch what's out there. Look, work with what you have and hone in on that, and learn from it and just experience. You just gotta keep going out there and doing it. And you'll find the answers.
In time, you'll find the answers. I love that. And I have to say that even though we never met, and this is the first time for us to speak, but when I have to face, again, a 200 pounds man, 6'2", I was told that, Faye, you have no excuse to say that, I'm 5'4", back then 115 pounds. And because Chris Yen, was this powerful woman who punched and kicked harder than anybody else, easily than any man in the dojang. So you've been my inspiration. And I love when you said work with your assets. And you'll be very, very powerful and be true to yourself. So, man, I can't think of a better way to conclude that.
I'm very happy to have shared, everything that I can and that I know. And thank you for this opportunity, Faye. I had a lot of fun doing my first podcast with you. And, it's just exactly what I anticipated to be, because I could tell, I've been also hearing your other podcasts and reading up on your background and, seeing your pictures. Your picture tells a lot, and I felt this is exactly how it's going to be. So I'm very comfortable, and thank you for creating this very comfortable atmosphere and this allowing me to be who I am and speak candidly. So I very much enjoyed this process. Thank you.
To listen to more episodes of the Feisworld podcast, please subscribe on iTunes or visit feisworld.com. That is FEISWORLD, where you can find show notes, links, other tools, and resources. You can also follow me on Twitter at Feisworld. Until next time, thanks for listening.